over the next 7 days, I will be looking at Jonah chapter 4. Jonah chapter 4, because not the bit about the fish, that's the famous bit, but this is a bit about the plant, I guess. The big idea in Jonah chapter 4 is about God's graciousness, God's goodness, but also our anger, our frustration with God for being too gracious, I guess, too forgiving towards the wrong people. And the temptation when dealing with anger, dealing with frustration is to tell people to not do it, stop doing it. But God is so gracious towards Jonah as well. He helps him deal with it step by step. Revealing not just the triggers, not just what sets him off, but the reasons behind those triggers, those hidden reasons for our anger that sometimes go unnoticed because it's just hidden, it's just buried inside, but those triggers bring it out. So what is it? What's the real reason behind those things, behind those frustrations, behind those anger that we have, perhaps even with God? Well, that's what I'll be exploring over the next 7 days. I'm here in Bangsar today in Malaysia. Over the next 7 days in Jonah chapter 4, this is day 1 of Jonah chapter 4. There's a Malay word called atas, or posh. Atas means, you're very posh. And when we think of a sin like anger, we tend to think of it as an atas sin, a respectable sin that if your boss gets angry, your pastor gets angry, we say that he's stressed out, he needs to take a holiday, and it's not a big deal. But twice in Jonah chapter 4, God says to Jonah, is it well for you to be angry? Is it good? And the point that God is trying to get across very, very gently and very, very graciously is to say that no, it's not a good thing. It's a really serious thing. In fact, Jesus says to be angry with your brother is, tantamount to murder. It's one of those disqualifying sins if you're a leader of God's people. And so anger is a really serious thing. But graciously, God tries to show Jonah this, tries to help him to come to grips with this, and gives him, a real solution to it, not just on the surface, on how to manage his anger, but how to change it to joy, change it to love, change it to graciousness. And if it can happen to someone like Jonah, a man of God, I take it that it can happen to me, it can happen to you as well. And just to be able to recognize how serious it is, and to recognize that there is a solution, beyond just finding the triggers, but finding a real solution to that deep-seated, temperament that just wants to rail at God, wants to find fault with God, but to be able to find joy, find meaning, find forgiveness, find graciousness through God. And so that's just a reflection for today. This is Taman Bahagia, in Malaysia, and this is day 2 of Jonah chapter 4. A big reality of having a garden like this, it's pulling out these things, it's pulling out weeds. And I mentioned this because in Jonah chapter 4, Jonah's anger is not just one weed. We find out in verse 2 of chapter 4 that he's always been angry. He's been angry since the beginning, when he ran away to Tarshish. Even when he was preaching to the Ninevites, he was angry with God because he knew that God would forgive them. And the situation in Jonah's heart is not just one bit of anger in his heart, but actually an overflow of anger. Imagine a garden full of weeds, a heart full of anger and full of hatred towards God and towards those whom God is trying to forgive. Now, in contrast to this, in that same verse, Jonah accuses God of this, of being slow to anger, of being abounding in love, of being full of compassion. And you see there a contrast in terms of God and Jonah. God, who has every right to judge, every right to be angry with sin, also having every right to show compassion and to show love towards those who sin against him. And it makes us think, which garden is your heart? What kind of condition is your heart in? Is it just having these bits of anger that sometimes occasionally come out? That's all of us. Or is it overrun? Is it unresolved? Is it unrepented sin? Hopefully what God wants us to be is the latter, where we are able to come to a point of forgiveness and compassion towards those who sin against us, and perhaps those who even sin against God, and to bring them to the cross, where they can bring their anger and find their love and forgiveness, and to find Jesus Christ. This is day 3 of Jonah chapter 4. Hi, I'm back from Malaysia, and it's good to be back in Cambridge, but if I'm honest, I miss home, I miss the food, I miss my family. I miss the food. But I did bring some souvenirs back, including this hot meals, very spicy pot of noodles. Check out the chilies in there, including this Penang white curry. This is very spicy but very, very good. Check out the red chili paste on this beautiful bowl of noodles. But the pièce de résistance is this. It's the pedas gila, the crazy spicy instant noodles. You have to be insane to eat these noodles. So I probably won't. Thank you, Papa, for buying me this. Why do I mention this? Well, twice in Jonah chapter 4, twice, God says to Jonah, is it good? Does it feel good? Does it feel right for you to feel this anger, to feel this hatred towards me? And if we were honest, the times when we felt that anger, it felt good. It felt addictively good. And God is saying, you've lost control. You are pedas gila. You're crazy. You've lost control of your anger. And what God does, interestingly, we'll look at this tomorrow, is God triggers that anger to show Jonah that he has lost control, but also to show Jonah that God is in control. God is in control of his grace. God is in control of his own anger. And God wants to help Jonah to see that his anger is not good. This is day 4 of Jonah chapter 4.